A local resident returns after a long journey to somewhere, and Weatherbot 95 goes on his very first date. I'm the Lone Transmitter, and coming to you live from Yellowbrook City, you're listening to Wasteland Free Radio. First things first, Radlanders. Weatherbot 95 is perfectly fine, and he says he is so sorry for storming out on us the way he did. If you don't remember, Weatherbot 95 tried to use some black market firmware and it screwed up his vocal processor, and he was saying some pretty unhinged things the last time he was around. But he had Maximilians remove the bad firmware, and she replaced it with one of her very own custom patches. And wouldn't you know it, no more glitches. I tried to tell him not to trust those back alley firmware dealers, but he is a little obstinate, and I tend to forget that he's a robot and he's programmed. It's not the same thing as a human brain. There's less elasticity there. My vocal processor isn't working very well either. But he had Max take care of it, and she is just so happy to have him around. I know she'll take really good care of him. So Weatherbot 95 is feeling much better, and he even sent us a forecast. It's still loading though. It'll be ready in a little while. Has anybody else heard rumors of the angry old woman who's been walking the city at night? Apparently, she's got this habit of slamming her fists against the doors of every single one of Yellowbrook's defunct pizza joints, asking for a refund. I've got no issue if she thinks she's been wronged by someone, but I can promise you this: none of these fine culinary establishments have been in business as long as I've been here, and I've been here for a while. Unless it's a doomsday cult, a power failure, or a death bot on the loose, I don't really care what happens in the streets of Yellowbrook City, but she was loud enough to mess with my recording, and I swear, she just went from one bistro to another, knocking on the doors and demanding that it's her money and she wants it now. Yellowbrook City only has one restaurant, Apocalypse Now, a juice bar and human arcade, and I can promise you they don't serve pizza. They don't really serve much by way of food at all. They are a juice bar. But you can go to the back room where they serve something called human food. And I've never been to the back room. Nobody goes to the back room. Probably because nobody ever returns from the back room. So I went out and asked for an interview, and she declined. But I'm going to call her Mrs. Pizza. And Mrs. Pizza wants her money back. And she's willing to keep everyone awake at night to make it happen. And now for a brief look at our traffic. This is no different than any other day. I still haven't seen any cars, trucks, or tanks on the road, so we are pretty safe as far as that is concerned. We probably don't have to worry about that for a while. But I have great news for anyone who travels the Radlands. Because after some minor scrapes and skirmishes and some local teenagers spray painting dirty words on rock faces, it appears the ancient wreckage that has blocked the road between Lithium City and Yellowbrook City has finally been cleared after a monumental joint effort from both Maximilians and the Mutant Moms. That's absolutely right. Our favorite road warrior has been stepping up to the plate and working alongside all of us Radlanders for a better future. We really are just trying to make a new world for all of our post-apocalyptic communities, and we are trying to make it happen together. It really warms my heart, and it's that sense of cooperation that makes the people of Yellowbrook City the best in the Radlands. And for the record, yes, I know Rough Roxanne isn't actually from Yellowbrook, but she's contributed more to our little corner of civilization than folks like the Grand Reverend Supreme. You know, the doomsday preacher who hosts ice cream socials. I've heard his recipe has been improving, and it actually kind of resembles something close to ice cream, but that is just not enough for me. I would like to see him do some actual good for the community. Like maybe he could give us an accurate prophecy for once, if you believe in that sort of thing. Now, you may have heard the Radlands described as a swirling cauldron of radioactive cultures, and I think that might be accurate. I haven't seen the whole world, but I have seen over a dozen different cultures with different moral standards. You've got your raiders, survivalists, and your cannibals, but they're not all bad people. I mean, the last cannibal I knew asked for my consent before eating me, and that's when I, very politely declined. And he did just let me go, which was kind of refreshing, if I'm gonna be honest. But it does beg the question, do people ever say yes to him? Like, what has he been eating this whole time? Of course, then you've got your road warriors. I mean, just look at Rough Roxanne, who I'm pretty sure fought in the war, or at least a war. There have been a few of them, after all. So, we are a little concerned that we won't be able to overcome our differences. But it's not like we're two nuclear world powers fighting for dominance over a dying planet. That already happened once. Or twice. Nobody would ever describe me as an optimist, but I feel pretty good about all of this cooperation. I think moving that wreckage is going to really open things up for all of the cities around here. Yes, including New Spring City up north. You know I don't like them. I just have a problem with their local DJ. That's all. DJ Mathematicus. He thinks he's so smart and well-spoken and mathematical. Ugh, it just drives me nuts. Planning on doing some hiking? Hoping to tackle such great heights as the peak of Mount Mayfield? Or maybe you'd rather dive into caves and caverns, darker than the 3-year blackout and deeper than the... I'm sorry, I thought I had something for this. Anyway, don't leave the protective dome without a dose of Dynamo Science Lab's very own experimental compound, oxenite. Tested on humans and cyborgs for your safety, this proprietary mixture is designed to distribute oxygen, nitrogen, and other elements into your bloodstream, and one dose is enough to provide you and your cells with enough protection to survive even the harshest of atmospheric conditions. So if you are positively glowing at seeing the great outdoors and experiencing all of the wild and spectacular things the Radlands have to offer, make sure you stock up on oxenite. Oxenite. Next level breathing for the next generation. Well, I'm afraid the pack of wild dogs that took over the Chevy Corsica by the Little League Park has moved on. They were good dogs, especially Triborks, my 3-eyed furry friend. My guess is that they finally upgraded to something with all-wheel drive and potentially a moonroof. They are smart dogs with impeccable taste, and it's not like gas mileage is really something they have to consider. And yes, I know I said the Corsica was the height of luxury, so how could there possibly be any upgrades? I know, I'm not stupid, okay? I just really loved that car. And the one in the Little League Park feels like a second home for me. I've taken shelter inside those 4 doors during fallout storms. I've hidden there during deathbot raids. My first time getting to second base was in the back seat of that car. Holding hands, what a scandal. Maximilians and I met up over by the Corsica the other day. It is our usual drop point, but we happened to be there at the exact same time. That usually doesn't happen. So we did our usual exchange of coffee, copper wire, and some drugs for whatever I have to offer. In this case, it's usually just some advertising space. She might not be an official sponsor of this episode, but we're friends, and I'm really impressed by everything she's done. She runs a pretty huge operation. I would never want to. I don't want to do anything that, large scale. I really like my, one-man scavenger show that I do. I find whatever I need out in the wild, and whatever I don't use, I give or sell back to Max. It is a mutually beneficial exchange, and we've been doing it for years. I love helping out my friends when I can. So after we finished our business, we just kind of hung out for a while. She told me what to expect with Weatherbot 95's new firmware, and I feel pretty confident that he's going to be fine for a while. I just hope he sticks to the plan this time and uses only official firmware updates, or at least the ones Max makes for him. After a few more minutes, she reached into her bag and grabbed a couple bottles of special edition green iridescent liquid, and we just kind of hung out. It was a nice break from all the commotion and craziness that comes along with living in the Radlands. Now, normally it would have been too early for me, but it's always the apocalypse somewhere, right? So we cracked open a couple of hot ones and chilled in the front seats of the Corsica. The front seats, so you can relax, Anime Fan 29. I would never hit on Weatherbot 95's potential girlfriends. That is not how we do things. I have way too much respect for him, and I have way too much respect for the Tech Bro Code. You just don't do that. I realize not everybody is a cyborg and not everybody has a robot for a best friend, but when your best friend is a robot and they hit it off with somebody, you don't get in the way of that. That's just not cool, man. Also, no disrespect to Max at all, but I'm just not into her. She's not my type. I'm not actually sure what my type is, but based on my dating history, they tend to always be cannibals. And that sucks. Or bites, or whatever the joke is. I don't know. Again, I'm not saying all cannibals are bad people. A lot of them are just farmers with crops and cattle. And not human cattle. That's not what I'm talking about. They have normal 2-headed and 3-headed cows, just like every other farm out there. They don't produce milk, and I don't trust the meat that comes from them, but other people do, and if having that meat stops these people from eating other people, then I say go for it. Good for them. And I know what you're thinking. Hey, lone transmitter, it might be a good idea for you to bring this up in therapy. Yeah, I thought about that. Except I introduced my last boyfriend to my therapist because they said they might want one as well, and my therapist hasn't returned my emails, and I'm pretty sure she's been eaten. It's either that or she ran away with my ex-boyfriend, which I think is worse. Either way, I'm gonna have to talk about this in therapy. You see the problem. I'm not sure how many of you have actually looked for a therapist out there in the Radlands, but there are not many of them, and I don't know about the rest of you, but I have a lot of trauma to process. And I'm not talking about my lack of a dating life. They don't call me the lone transmitter for nothing. But like family trauma too. I mean, when you've got a dad and a mom and a dad and a stepdad and another stepdad and a stepmom, things can get a little confusing. Especially when your stepmom turns out to be an internationally renowned master thief. So if any of you Radlanders are aware of a therapist that has not been eaten and doesn't have a tendency to run away with their patients, please send them my way. I have a lot of stuff I would like to process and get off my chest. Of course, I am a cyborg and I can compress these feelings and put them in a USB drive to save them for later, but that doesn't sound like the healthiest thing to do. Sorry about that whole diatribe about cannibals and stuff. What was I saying? Oh, right, Max the Millions. I guess Max and her crew found a massive electronics warehouse out there in the Radlands, but I guess none of it was usable. Nearly every capacitor, resistor, and transistor had burned out, and all of the copper wire was oxidized beyond use. Yeah, this is the Radlands, and we have to take what we can get. But using subpar electronic components is kind of dangerous. Could you imagine if I used some of that stuff to fix my cybernetic implant? Or to update Weatherbot 95's wiring harness? Come on, he's got enough problems. You get one of those values wrong and the results would be disastrous. Max usually tells me where her salvage operations are once she's finished with them. She likes to give me a head start on other scavengers out there, and since she always leaves enough for the rest of us, that really does help me out. But she refused to tell me where this one was, because she didn't want any of that stuff out there in the world. That's something they don't really teach you in Rad Scouts. Half of scavenging is just finding the scraps of other civilizations that tried to start up after the apocalypse, but they just didn't have the right stuff to make it happen. Not us, though. We're Yellowbrook City. Yellowbrook strong, or whatever. We'll be fine. Right? So minus this little setback, Max is doing pretty well for herself. And even if she's not sponsoring this episode, I'll still give her a plug. She can find anything and everything for a price. Just don't ask her for guns or ammo. Whoa, 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 whoa. Oh, wow. What was that? Whew. Oh man, I felt that all the way in my implant, I think. Ow. Hang on, I can still feel it. Hang on a second. Okay, Dynamo Science Labs has been messing around with the egg for a while now, and once in a while, they just might poke it in a really sensitive spot, and I think that's what happens. Because that's happened twice, and this time my implant didn't get fried, but it did the last time. I can't wait until we figure out what's going on with that egg. It's caused enough problems in this town, and yeah, I guess tourism has increased because there's like 6 more people here in Yellowbrook. But at what cost? Maybe some genius at the science fair will figure out what the space egg is and what we should tell it to go do with itself. I'm really tired of this. At least Weatherbot 95 is safe at Max the Million's compound right now. She lives far enough away from Dynamo Science Labs that it doesn't really affect them when something happens there. She has plenty of clean power for him, so I probably don't have to worry. Well, here's the forecast from Weatherbot 95. It says, it's getting hot over here. That's all it says. Oh, I get it now. Good for you, Weatherbot 95. That's awesome. You didn't need to tell me that. I was hoping for something a little more scientific and a little more weather-related. At least my friends are doing okay. That's more important than how the weather's gonna be. It's not like he was gonna be accurate anyway. The Weatherbot platform is his secondary program, so it makes sense that he might make a mistake once or twice, but he will always try his best. Okay, considering that power surge was probably from the space egg, it's time for me to address this. If you're just joining us, or if you haven't been paying attention, the space egg crashed through the Freeman Street Bridge and caused a ton of damage last year. So Dynamo Science Labs took the egg to their warehouse where they would study it, and study it they have. So far, all we know is that we don't know much about it. We know that it came from before the Great Devastation and that it fell from space. I'm assuming it's some kind of a time capsule, but we don't know what's inside of it. And they don't know how to get inside of it. So to work around this problem, they've decided to hold a raffle, and you have to pay 10 bits to participate. And if you pay your 10 bits, you can take your best shot at hitting the space egg with a giant hammer. I know I'm not a scientist, but this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard of, with the exception of maybe trickle-down economics. So no, I will not be participating in the egg smash portion of the science fair. I'm just gonna go there with my regular science project and call it a day. Make sure you get your science projects turned in to Dr. Dynamo before the end of the week, or you will be disqualified. Don't worry, they don't employ any deathbots anymore. You won't be that kind of disqualified. You just won't be allowed to compete in the science fair. Really low stakes. Sorry if I gave the wrong impression. So, you know how I'm afraid to use substandard components in my cybernetic implant because it's attached to my brain, and a power surge going straight to my brain is probably not the best thing in the world. So I don't. But I do use those components in things like my transmission relay and other aspects of my work. So I was climbing on top of Danny's Six Fingers' old factory, and I'm allowed to be there, don't forget. He's more than happy to have me there taking care of the place and looking after it. The last thing he wants is local authorities to tear it down and turn it into a housing complex. It's not like we have a population big enough to need a housing complex. So I looked down from the roof where I was working on my relay, and there Danny Six Fingers was. He'd come home. He's been gone for a long time, months at this point, and I'll be honest, I thought he died, or met somebody and moved away. So I climbed down and I joined him for some coffee in his living room, and then I shook his hand. His entirely normal hand that has 5 fingers on it. And I looked at his other hand also has 5 fingers on it. And he started laughing at me. Apparently, he found a doctor that fixed his 6-fingered hand problem. So I guess my old friend Danny Six Fingers is just Dan now? that's fine. Good for him. Of course, I apologized for calling him Danny Six Fingers this entire time. He said don't worry about it, he actually loves the nickname. But he wouldn't tell me what doctor worked on him or where it happened. So if you're looking to have 5 fingers instead of 6, 7, or however many you have, just know there is someone out there that can help you. I just don't know who it is. I'm actually really proud of Dan because he's what you'd call a nuco boomer. He doesn't need a doctor. He knows what's wrong with him, that kind of guy. He went and saw a doctor, and now he has normal human hands. Of course, he was wearing gloves the entire time. He does own a glove factory, so I am assuming his hands are normal, but that's a pretty safe assumption, I think. So, with Weatherbot95 having his programming fixed and my old friend Dan, returning from a long trip to somewhere, things are starting to feel pretty normal again. Except for random power surges from a mysterious space egg and the Grand Reverend Supreme spouting nonsense about when the world is finally going to end. Okay, maybe not normal, but at least radical. A little radical. Alright, taking you out tonight is another artist from that beautiful stretch of mystic land that used to be known as the Pacific Northwest. This is Tanner Cundy with his song, Ordinary Places. I'm the Lone Transmitter. Thank you so much for listening to Wasteland Free Radio.
How the light combines in perfect distance. How we're holding hands in heart-shaped systems. How the atmosphere is colored crimson. And when the evening is a perfect potion, and we both can blend in single motion. When I'm breathing underneath your ocean, it's like love in silence. I feel it in the way you listen. I'm nearest when the twilight glistens. I am leaning in and turning from a million faces. I'd rather be the king of ordinary places. How suspenseful when the image cuts right where I'm reaching, leaves it up to the imagination. What could we be up to? I swear it's like heaven, but in the moment when the floodlight flashes and the guardians are scattered dashing, and our picture-perfect sky is crashing. It's just like love in silence. I feel it in the way you listen. I'm nearest when the twilight glistens. I am leaning in, so turning from a million faces. I'd rather be the king of ordinary
Hey Radlanders, thank you so much for listening to episode 8 of Wasteland Free Radio. This show is so much fun to produce, I can't even tell you how much of a blast I have with this. Today's retro resequencer was Tanner Kundi with his song, Ordinary Places. If you're a musician and want to get your music onto this show, please send us a sample at wastelandfreeradio@gmail.com. Our background intro and outro music is by 11D7, and they just put out a B-sides version of their new album, and it is awesome. There's stuff on there I've not heard before. There are remixes, a ton of great stuff. You should check them out. 11D7 is alive is where they are on Instagram. I'll have links in the show notes. And if you feel the need for more post-apocalyptic content, you can go to our Patreon at patreon.com/wastelandfreeradio. There you'll find bonus episodes, some behind-the-scenes content, and OMG, other miscellaneous goodies. You'll also have first access to merchandise when we launch our merch store, and I cannot wait to get these designs out. It's going to be so much fun. Thank you so much to everybody who's been giving us ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It really does help us show up in people's searches. I really can't thank you enough. It actually does work. We'll see you all in a couple of weeks, and remember, when you're picking a weapon for the apocalypse, grab something like a crowbar. It makes a great melee weapon, but its actual use as a crowbar makes it a perfect utility for breaking and entering.